Hey folks, in this episode of Soft Plastics 101, we are talking about jerk shads or jerk bait style of soft plastics. So what makes these different to grubs and paddle tails that we've spoken about so far? Well, as you can see, there's definitely no curl tail on that, and there's also definitely no paddle tail. So what gives this action? You do. You give action to this plastic. So unlike the curl tail, which is loaded with action, and the paddle tail that has that kick and that paddle in the tail that gives it the body roll, the jerk bait or jerk shads is basically just a straight tail, often with a split section, sometimes with just a single tail, and you provide the action, as the name suggests, jerk bait. You jerk the plastic, you twitch the plastic, you hop the plastic, you high speed the plastic to give it that action. You can see we're imitating a bait fish basically in varying sizes. We've got that bait fish belly and that bait fish tail flicking around there, and again available in a bunch of different sizes. So kicks off basically with this 3.75 inch streaks, and you can see that's a perfect little bait fish, hardy head, that sort of thing for in the estuaries. So really good on the flathead, brim, all those estuary type species, trevally. A really good snapper plastic as well if you're fishing reasonably shallow water. Cool thing with not having a tail, not having a paddle tail or a curl tail as well, is it doesn't take as much weight to get that plastic down deep. So once you get it down there, it's not up and down as aggressively. You can glide it down there, and then you can subtly hop it and jerk it and fish it down there in amongst where the fish are. So no paddle tail, no curl tail to slow it down on the sink, allows you to fish these in much deeper water much more quickly to get down into the strike zone. One of the most popular is the scented jerk shads. So they actually come scented with Procure scent. That's a 5 inch and a 7 inch. And stay tuned because there is a 4 inch about to drop as well. And the 4 inch is going to be perfect for flathead, snapper, estuary and bay type fishing with the jerk bait style profile. So very popular snapper bait, popular for pelagic species, reefies, all those sorts of things. But also don't forget about throwing these guys in the estuary as well for mulloway and snapper in the estuaries and those sorts of things. Even flathead will get onto those as well. An interesting one, this guy here, you can see it doesn't have the split tail. So it's only got one tail called a pin tail. So you'd wonder how that thing's going to work, but extremely popular on the tuna, mackerel, pelagic type species. Retrieved at high speed, that little tail gets a real wiggle up to it in the water. Otherwise, slow it down and it's extremely hard to stop that tail from moving. It'll just move around in the water for catching flathead, mulloway, all that sort of stuff. Split belly for easy rigging, and that's the 5 inch streaks pin tail plastic. Again, a jerkbait profile, so we're applying the action to the plastic. A couple of big fellas, there's an 8 inch Streaks XL, big lump of plastic, popular for offshore fishing, reef and pelagic species, and there's one even bigger, that's a 10 inch Heroes. 10 inches are 10 times tough. That's a big plastic. Because the Z-Man plastics are buoyant as well, the guys often rig that plastic to fish on the surface for kingfish as a stick bait. You can also fish it for GTs, big reefies, all those sorts of things. So again, that jerk bait profile, no action as such, we're applying the action to the plastic. So there you go, that's a range of jerkbait style plastics, extremely effective for fishing deeper water without that drag of the tail. You can get it down there a lot quicker. Also good for a high speed retrieve, and also excellent for those fishing the surf, those fishing off the rocks, land-based, where you need a big long cast without anything stopping that plastic from getting the distance for you. So there you go, let's have a look at a couple of ways we might fish a jerk shads plastic. All right, jerk shads plastic. So as we said, not a lot of action in that tail itself. We apply the action to that plastic. But sometimes we actually don't even want to apply any action to the plastic. There's a technique where we fish this jerk shad or jerk bait with a lightly weighted head, and we actually just cast that plastic out and we let it just glide down naturally like a dying bait fish that's sinking down with the current, with the water movement. So they often refer to it as float lining, like you can float line a bait down there, you can float line a plastic down there. You're just letting it float down with the current, with the tide, and away it goes. So very effective if you cast that plastic near bridge pylons, rock walls, other structure, and let it glide down. Or if you find birds or bait fish or fish on the sounder offshore, just allow that jerkbait to just glide and float down to them. Deadly on snapper, mulloway, other species as well. So all that simply is, we don't have all that action. We flick it into where we want it to sink down, and we just keep an eye on that line. as it sinks down in case we get a touch, and we can whack that if we do get a touch. But once that plastic's drifted down to the bottom, we can then either crank that up fast, or we can burn and kill it, or we can hop it back up to the boat, and we might get a fish back as the lure comes back to the boat. Also, if you're offshore by yourself fishing or with your mates fishing or whatever, you might want to throw one out, put it in the rod holder, and then fish another yourself. So you've got one rod as with that lure just drifting down naturally in the rod holder. You've got the other rod yourself that you're fishing, and you'll be surprised how many times off goes that rod holder that you've just got drifting down while you work the other plastic. So that's float lining, just letting that plastic float down with the current and the tide.
Leave that out there. I'm going to let that sink to the bottom, because this fish here, I was finding it really hard to catch these fish. This one, I cast in amongst the workups and they just would not touch my bait. So I decided, I saw the fish on the sounder all around underneath me, on the bottom even. So I just dropped this lure to the bottom, jigged it up twice, whammo, we're on. I've got a slightly heavier jig head on this time. A lot of the time I'm just using a 3/8 jig head. This is a half. That's just so I can cast a little bit further.
Because that jerkbait gets down there quick as well, we've got a fair bit of current running along this edge here that we're fishing. So a jerkbait's good for this. We can run and gun, we can cover ground quickly. That plastic doesn't get held up with its action. So we can prospect the edge very quickly. Boom, down there, hop, 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 and work that edge very quickly. So we can flick that plastic in there, and we can do what we call hopping. So get that plastic to the bottom, it's down there nice and quick. Couple of hops, we're back down there nice and quick again, and we can just hop that plastic back to the boat. So we're making sure we stay in contact with the bottom here. We may not if we've found suspended fish on the sounder, so we can see the fish on the sounder. We might just work that level that they're at. But in this case here, we might catch a flatty off this edge if we stay near the bottom. So that's hopping the plastic. Flick it out, sink it down, let it hit the bottom, keep an eye on that line, goes slack, give it a hop. Slack again, hop it back out. Come on, big flatty, just eat it. So we're staying in touch with that plastic, but we are allowing it to sink on a little bit of slack line and just watching for the bite. As that plastic hits the bottom, hop it back up again. So we might dead stick it down. We might get it down there and hop it back. We also might just burn that plastic back, fish it fast, high speed retrieve it. So we could just fish that plastic quick, so it's breaking the surface, or it's just below the surface, zigzagging back and forward. And that's good for salmon, tailor, tuna, trevally, all those high-speed pelagic species. We can high-speed that plastic, and I can watch it come out of the water, pop, pop out of the water, or I can bring it back so it's just below the surface and it's swimming back toward me. Deadly way to fish these things. And the other is the burn and kill, where we burn that plastic and then we kill it. So burn it, pause it. Burn it, pause it. Burn, kill. Burn, kill. And what you might do is you might find those fish on the sounder, snapper or something feeding, flick that plastic out, let it drift down there, and we might dead stick it down. So we're using one technique. We get it to the bottom, give it a few hops. We might get a fish doing that. Then the last thing we do, we wind it fast. So we've actually used a few different retrieves in the one cast of the lure. So there you go. That's a jerkbait, extremely versatile. You apply the action to it, as much or as little action as you want. Deadly baitfish representation. Cheers.